Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Muhammad Syafiq Haikal. Student ID 28025224430. I'm from International Relations major from class LC66. This presentation is prepared for the Business Diplomacy and Geopolitics course under the supervision of our lecturer, Mr. Aji Roseno Afandi at Bina Nusantara University. Today I want to talk about something looks like a simple export ban on the surface, but it's actually one of the most strategic industrial policy Indonesia has ever made. Most people hear nickel policy and think, oh, Indonesia just banned exports. Technically, it's true, but people completely miss the point. The real question is, can a national government industrial policy fundamentally reshape a country's position in the global production network and at the same time strengthen ASEAN's regional integration? My answer is yes. And throughout this presentation, I will show you exactly how and why the government, not the corporation, is the key actor that makes this possible. To analyze this case, I will use two theories. Number one is global production network as my primary theories, which explain how governments, corporations, technology, and infrastructure interact to organize production across borders. Crucially, GPN recognizes that governments are not passive, they are active shapers of production networks. And my supporting theory is comparative regionalism, which explains how regional integration doesn't always come from formal agreements, treaties, or something else. Sometimes, one country's national policy creates regional benefits organically. Together, these two theories explain both what Indonesia is doing and why it matters beyond its own borders. Before the policy itself, let's understand the global context. The world is currently undergoing an energy transition, moving away from the fossil fuels toward electric vehicles, renewable energy, and battery technology. This has made critical minerals, especially nickel, strategically vital. Nickel is a core component of EV vehicle and EV batteries. Countries and corporations are competing aggressively to secure nickel supply chains. Whoever controls nickel processing controls a critical node in the future global economy. And Indonesia, sitting on the world's largest nickel reserves, recognize this moment and decide to act. But here's the problem Indonesia faced for decades. Despite holding massive nickel reserves, Indonesia's role in the global economy was limited to extracting and exporting raw ore. The real value, refining, battery material production, manufacturing happened in China, Japan, and South Korea. This is what development economists call the raw material trap. Resource-rich countries supply the inputs while the other countries capture the economic value. Think it of this way. If you grow the coffee bean but someone else makes Starbucks, who profits? Indonesia was the coffee farmer. This policy is Indonesia's decision to build its own roastery, and this is where the government's role become absolutely critical. So what does the policy actually involve? In 2020, the Indonesian government implemented a full export ban on raw nickel ore, but this was just the trigger. The real policy is much broader. The government built and designated special economic zones for nickel processing. It created fiscal incentives, such as import duty exemptions, tax holiday, to attract investment, especially from foreign investment, into smelters and battery factories manufacturing. It established regulatory mandates requiring domestic processing before any export, and it negotiated directly with global corporations to establish production facilities inside Indonesia. This is not mining policy. This is a deliberate industrial ecosystem design engineered by the state. The two flagship results of this policy are the Indonesia Morowali Industrial Park in Central Sulawesi and the Indonesia Weda Bay Industrial Park in North Maluku. These parks are not just factories, they are integrated production systems, clustering smelters, battery material processors, and the manufacturer in one location. Major investors include Chinese firms like Tsingshan and Zenshe, alongside global automakers and technology companies. In just a few years, Indonesia went from a raw ore exporter to a country with over 30 operational nickel smelters and billions of dollars commitment investment, targeting battery materials and eventually EV production. Now here we are, the most essential question. Why is the government the main actor and not the MNC or multinational corporations? Because without government intervention, none of this would have happened in Indonesian soil. MNC follow profit left to the market force alone, and the global company would continue refining nickel in China and Japan, where infrastructure or expertise already existed. It was the Indonesian government that changed calculation through regulation, incentive, infrastructure, and direct negotiation. The government created the condition that made Indonesia attractive enough for MNC to relocate the production. This is exactly what GPN theory calls a developmental state, a government that doesn't just regulate markets but actively shapes them to achieve national development goals. Now let's apply GPN theory more deeply. GPN scholars like Neil Coe, Peter Deacon, and Jeffrey Henderson argue that the nation participate in global production at different levels of value. The key concept here is strategic coupling, when a government deliberately aligns its national assets with global production networks to capture higher value. Before this policy, Indonesia was coupled to GPN at the extraction stage, the lowest value point. After this policy, Indonesia is strategically coupling itself a smelting, refining, battery material production, and increasingly battery cell manufacturing, each stage capturing significantly more economic value than the last. The government engineered the shift, not the market, not MNCs, the government. Within GPN theory, this movement up to the value chain is called economic upgrading. There are two types we need to distinguish. Process upgrading means you move to higher value production stages, but the knowledge and technology remain in foreign hands. Functional upgrading means you genuinely build domestic capability, local engineers, local R&D, local ownership of technology. Right now, Indonesia is achieving process upgrading. Foreign companies dominate the industrial parks. Technology transfer is limited. Indonesia workers are employed, but the intellectual property stays abroad. For Indonesia to achieve functional upgrading, the deeper goal, the government must go further. Stronger local requirements, content, domestic R&D investment, and real technology transfer mandates in investment agreements. Now let's zoom out to regional level using comparative regionalism. Head and Soderbaum frameworks teach us that regional integration doesn't always come from treaties or supranational institutions. ASEAN is a perfect example. Not like EU or European Union, ASEAN operates on national sovereignty, consensus, and non-interference. Member states pursue their own industrial strategies, but those strategies create cross-border economic effect that integrate the region organically. Indonesia's nickel downstreaming policy is exactly this kind of strategy. It is nationally designed, but its impact flows across ASEAN's entire economic landscape. Here's how the regional integration works in practice. Process nickel and battery materials from Indonesia feed EV batteries factories in Thailand, ASEAN Automotive's hub. Electronic manufacturers in Vietnam and Malaysia benefit from regional battery supply chains. Singapore provides the financial services, logistics, and investment infrastructure that ties this ecosystem together. This is what comparative regionalism calls de facto regional integration, economic integration driven by production linkage, not formal agreements. And this is directly support the ASEAN Community Vision 2025, which calls for a highly integrated and competitive economy, stronger investment flows, industrial upgrading, and deeper regional connectivity. Indonesia's government, through one national policy, is advancing all four of these regional goals simultaneously. To conclude our presentation, Indonesia's nickel downstreaming policy proves that in 21st century, states still matter. Through GPN theory, we see a national government acting as strategic coordinator, engineering economic upgrading by redesign Indonesia's position in GPN. Through comparative regionalism lens, we see how one national industrial policy creates de facto regional integration across ASEAN, advancing the goals of the ASEAN Community Vision 2025. The government is not a bystander, it is the architect, and the Indonesia nickel story is only just beginning. Thank you for listening to me. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Santi Santi Om. Namo Buddhaya. Salam kebajikan.